All right? But if you say how much cash you have to work with today, what has it told you? How much cash they have, and then it's told you how much they have today if you have a problem to pay down some debts, doesn't it, later on? So these things are important. One thing I want that you all as agents should know, you must understand, by the way, you can ask somebody how much they make, all right? But you cannot take the next step and say you qualify, don't qualify. Do you understand that legally? You go to jail if you don't lose your license. You cannot be a determinant. Okay, you cannot ask your prospect, well, you know, what do you make, what's your debt, what's it? You can't qualify for that house. You cannot do that. Now, that's a broker problem. I don't get into it. Even a mortgage lender really should have everything in front of him, shouldn't he? Should have a reliable, remember how we're talking about technical aspects of qualifying? Should have a valid credit report, should have the actual verification of employment back, not what he said, what actually got reported. So anyway, you should understand that. The next thing that I want to talk about, we won't flip these over, rather talk about it, is the final close to contract. Now, this does not affect me directly, but indirectly it does. And it affects me indirectly in the sense that you all have done your jobs either by calling a lender or doing it yourself so that prospect feels that he can truly qualify for the house when you close him. There is nothing worse. Your agents have been around a long time will tell you to get to a closed situation and then all of a sudden you find out that guy says, well, I can't afford, the interest rates are too high. The monthly's too high. Because there is a very, first off, if you get it front like that, it's a very difficult time to get it, isn't it? Okay? It's a very difficult problem to try and overcome right there on the firing line when you're trying to write that deal. And the second thing is, more often than not, it comes up as a subconscious objection where instead of saying, hey, you know, that's my real problem, the interest rates are too high, it's, I don't like that house. No, I don't like that house. No, I don't like that house. And you're showing them around, you become a tour guide, and you've never really found out what his problem is. And you've never solved that problem. The final area which really is so critical to you all in getting your deals is obviously the contract presentation itself. And how does it affect me? How many times, and every time I give this I have heads that bob up and down, how many times is this going to happen in your careers? For you all, it has happened in your careers where all of a sudden you're sitting at the table, you're the selling agent, and the listing agent is Terry. Now, we know that this would never happen in real estate, but Terry secretly thinks she's got a deal coming in, okay, on the same house, right, an hour from now. And Terry says, and as we know, these things don't happen in real estate, Terry says, well, this looks a little tight and qualifying to me. Do you think that seller's going to sign that contract in a million years? No way, okay? But you have to be able to handle that type of objection. Well, I'll tell you what, Terry, I'm quite sure that Mr. Jones here qualifies, and I'll tell you what, I have the formulas with me, we've worked them out. Why don't we go over them from Sam over there so he can feel confident when he signs his contract that they are going to qualify based on what he's told me. Or I'll tell you what, Terry, why don't, because I'm quite sure that they qualify, why don't we call a lender up right now, call Jimmy Jones over at Weaver Brothers, okay, and we'll actually work the qualifying out in front of Mr. Sammy over here. Okay, so when Sam signs the contract, he can have every confidence that he qualifies. How many times is a reverse situation going to happen or happen to you, Mary, where you're all of a sudden sitting and now you're on the other line, okay? You're now the listing agent. And all of a sudden, the selling agent gives you the qualifying sheet. And you know they don't qualify, just based on experience, okay, and what you learn. And all of a sudden, the seller is saying, my people qualify. You know, and you get intimidated. All of a sudden, that seller, this, by the way, example happened to come out of your office 2 years ago from someone I was taught, oh, I won't name. How many times, when this type of situation happens, you get intimidated by it? Okay? You really do. You know they don't qualify. You have to be able to handle it. All of a sudden, that seller, who was your dear friend for years, now is your mortal enemy within a space of about 30 seconds. They're your mortal enemy. He's got to get down to Louisiana and get that house on the 8% assumption that he's getting a great deal on.
What's that contract?
And what you have to do to handle that is, I'm quite certain that they qualify, either have it all laid out, or let's call a lender in somebody's presence and get the thing done. Does everybody follow? Any questions at all? It's basically just good salesmanship, being able to take underwriting guidelines, okay, and use them to your advantage to get deals, okay, that you normally wouldn't have, or to save deals. Because you get an agent that's been out there, you're a new agent, you get someone that's got 20 years experience, they're going to chew you up, right? For sure they are. I mean, they've been through it, all right? Ann's been around a long time. She knows all these cases. You're not going to flop one over on her.
Well, what I was going to say, I find now that people come in, they know the overall price they think they want, but by the time they decide on the house, you start sitting down and giving them the figures, they almost drop dead. So do you recommend going into specific figures right in the beginning, monthly payment with them?
Well, it depends. You know, it depends on the rapport that you have with your clients. A lot of people can do everything right up front. Everything's tied up neatly, okay? The other thing, some other people may wait a little bit. But there is one thing I think we all would agree with. Your fiduciary relationship is to the seller, okay? And your relationship is to protect the seller, okay, at all costs. So that that seller is not forced to move into an apartment, then finds out that really they didn't qualify anyway, all right, and you have a problem. So I would have to say, yes, there's flexibility there, but there also is a responsibility that, you know,
Yeah,
that every
I'm
agent
sorry,
has.
I jumped back to earlier where you said do everything up front. I was jumping back to ask you if you thought we should specifically right in the beginning get into monthly payments with the buyer.
I think it depends on the type of people. Remember how we said that the initial thing you have to do is establish a rapport? I think a lot of it depends on the relationship that you have. Some people, there's no problem. You know, you have the old guys that are the technocrats and they want to know what everything is. The other people, they want to see what that kitchen's going to look like out in that huge kitchen, okay? And if you know your job, you should be able to answer that question for. If you know you're going to have a problem up front, well, if you can ask the kind of questions so that you can qualify, you know your answer. You know what you're dealing with. You're not going to show them that $110,000 house when they're going to qualify for 90. The wife is going to say, "That's what I want. I love it." You ever try and downsell? Have we? You know? Do you know how much problem it is when someone sees that beautiful kitchen, they don't afford it, they can't afford it, and now you got to downsell somebody? You know, it's fun moving somebody up if they can afford it, right? But it's murder going down the other way, right? We all know that. Okay, any questions at all, what we're talking about? All right, now, we've covered a lot of these things. A couple of final thoughts. We're going to break in a couple minutes. A couple of final thoughts. Upfront qualifying is everything. It truly is in this business, especially today. Agents tend to concentrate on the wrong areas, okay, when qualifying. I think you've all seen that, and just based on your experience, and you all have a lot of experience here today. Some of the old myths shattered, right? The 2.5 times gross for conventional loans, right? That's out the window. Okay, that's an old swag method, isn't it? All right? The qualifying for a VA as much as FHA, really it's a little bit, FHA is really kind of in between. How about this one, a number C? How many times does this come? I used to get so intimidated when I first got in this business. I'd get some old agent that had 20 years experience and they would rip my head off. I would say, well, gee, your colonel can only qualify for, well, I had a guy, we did 5 times his gross. And the blood would just flow right out of me. Well, as I got older and learned a little more, the guy probably had no debts and no kids. Don't you see if you're counting, remember in our variables, if you're counting $125 per child, okay, if we're counting $125 a child, in today's world, that probably affects a case about $11,000, doesn't it, with today's interest rates. If you have one child, okay, and you have no children, you're both equal in all respects, I'm going to be showing her a house that's $11,000 more than I'm going to show you today. Okay, under a theory of 10 equals 1, right? Everybody follow what I'm doing now? So you have to ask the right question. How can you show somebody, in all good conscience anyway, but how can you show somebody a house VA if you don't ask them how many children they have today? I mean, how can you really? Okay, you can't. All right, now, this was one of my original handouts years ago. It's funny that I've had 3 or 4 people here that were in my old classes, okay? But if you remember, in my old classes, I used to teach a 2-hour, come in, wing it, go like crazy, right on that blackboard, right? This was one of my original, I had 4 little handouts, 4-page handout, right? Before I started to get obsessed with this thing. This was one of my original handouts, and with the exception of number 10, which is, I'm not sure how funny it is anymore, some of these, though, are still very valid. Paying down debts, okay? We've talked about that and how important it is. Gift letter. Does everybody understand how a gift letter should be used? It's a legitimate tool. It's not an exercise to defeat the underwriter. But you have to understand the rules of the game because they've changed. Years ago, anybody would sign it. A guy that was buying would sign a gift letter, sign his mom's name. Do you understand today the way underwriting is done? If you send a deal to me and there's a gift of $5,000 from Granny, I'm going to send a verification of deposit to Granny's account to see that she has the $5,000 to close that deal. Does everybody understand that? That's all, change.
How do you get her account number?
We ask it. What do you mean? When they come for application time, we will have him, okay, we will send the verification to Granny to put on her account number, or we'll get that information on the phone or whatever and then send it out. We have to get her signature on the verification before we can send it out, get her permission. If Granny says, well, I'm not giving you signing that, well then, you know, the deal's down the tube. All right, VA second trust. Everybody understand with VA you can have a second trust? You can have a second trust bigger than a first trust. I heard of a case like that. Had a huge second. All right.
Well, I don't know much about that.
How about it with VA? Yeah, absolutely. FHA, forget it.
But you have to qualify on the 2 trusts.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, sure. It becomes
Yeah.
liability, doesn't it?
Can you borrow?
And it has to go to VA.
Can
Okay?
you borrow the whole down payment?
Sure.
VA.
You can buy the down payment, closing costs. You can borrow till you're silly with VA. It's beautiful. But if you have a second trust, it has to go to VA. You can't VA automatic it. Anyway, pay raise within 60 days. With husbands and wives working today, you'd be kind of surprised if you have a little bit of a problem and it's marginal. You say, by the way, do you have any extra pay coming to you? The pay raise in the next 60 days? You'd be surprised how many now and then you'll hit one that'll say yes. Okay? But if you don't ask, you'll never know. And I can assure you, the mortgage lender isn't going to ask for you, most of them. They don't know what they're doing. All right, letter of employment. How about a registered nurse that comes up from Norfolk?
Yeah,
Okay?
that.
She's sitting there, she's not working, all of a sudden they want to move into a bigger house. Well, a nurse today can go out and get a letter of employment in an hour. They're in such demand. As long as you have a letter stating a starting time and an amount, which you know that she's going to get when she starts, they'll count it. Okay, preview credit report. Do you know by law your prospective purchaser can go look at his credit report? If you have any idea that there's a problem, or he does, why don't you send him to look at his credit report? Do you know I did that once? I went in, this is a true story, I went in to buy a couple suits. This has been years ago when I bought my first house. I went in to buy a couple suits, and I'm in there talking to the guy, and I was going to buy one suit, and he said, well, what, you know, I looked at him, I really liked him, I was going to buy 2 suits. And he said, well, why don't you just fill, I didn't have a check with me, or I had one check and I'd written it or something. He said, well, why don't you fill out this credit card application, and then we just buy the other one on credit card. So I said, fine, filled out, and I said, no, I don't want to do that. They sent the credit application in to the company, and they billed me $3 for processing, even though I'd never used it, okay? And I refused to pay it. They would send me I must have got this thing for a year and a half. Every month they'd send me this thing, you know? And I said, you know, okay, no, I just said I'm not going to do it. And when I went and checked my credit report, I had an R9, which is the worst rating. I had an R9 rating for a lousy $3 bill. So I went, and it took me forever. But I finally cleared it up, and they took it off my credit report. But these are instances where things can appear in your credit report that can cause problems. Anyway, co-mortgagor, okay, we know that. But one thing, most people are interested in co-mortgagors, not co-signers. They want it both on the note and the deed of trust today. You know that. But one thing I did want to tell you, especially for new agents, when you're out there and little Jimmy only makes $12,000 and Daddy who makes $80 is going to help him buy that house or that condo, they're not going to look at Daddy's $80. They look at the amount of residual income that's left over after Daddy pays for his Mercedes, after he pays for his yacht payment, after he pays for his alimony. Okay, do you follow what I'm saying? They're looking at how much residual income Daddy has. And you'd be surprised sometimes these people have big incomes. When you net it out, because they have a house payment, etc., there's not that much left over. So you've got to be careful on that. Closing costs and closing, oh, we've talked about that. All right.
Well, are you saying VA would take a co-mortgager?
No, not with VA. No, VA you can, you know, VA they play
Speaking
by
of
the rules.
VA, at one time, your interest rate for second trust VA had to be same as the first trust. That's no longer in effect, is it?
You know, I had a case come.
I did one time, and that was required.
Yes, it used to have to be the same, and you had to be very careful of balloons, by the way. Okay? If you ballooned a second, and let's say at the end of 3 years, when you send that case down to VA, they're going to look to see if he has enough assets to close the balloon. Do you understand that in 3 years? In other words, if you put it over a 30-year term, but with a 3-year balloon in it, they're going to look they see if he has the assets to close it in 3 years. Got to be careful on that, how you write your second trust. In addition to it, when you're writing your contract, okay, you have to disclose all important features of the second in the contract itself. You understand that?
For instance?
Well, if you have to write the term, 30 years, you're going to have to balloon
Interest.
the interest rate, okay?
It'd be better to wrap it.
Assume that the option
Well,
of the
that's
no
why
holder?
we're here. We'll talk about wraps later. Okay, but there might be an instance where instead of doing it, you want to wrap it.
Would you
Okay,
go back
this-
a little bit, co-mortgager versus co-sign?
Well, a co-mortgagor, you're on both, okay? And a
Yeah.
co-signer, you're not. The co-mortgagor is obviously more secure. By the way, on this, this is your last look of this. Everybody see this here? Huh? Do you understand why it's important to know it? Okay, maybe not the hairs between 6 and 10, 7 and 10, but there are instances in problem solving today where it is important for you. Now, we have 5 minutes more before we break, and that is, and it really only takes 5 minutes, I want to cover what I consider to be the 4 most serious questions that are asked of mortgage lenders today. And it's all in your book here. All you have to do is listen. And these are, last year when I was doing this course, I sat down and wrote a list of about 20 things that I considered important and narrowed it down to 4. They seem to be areas where realtors have serious problems in answering these questions. They call mortgage lenders and they get funny answers from the mortgage lenders. They can't get a straight answer from either one of them. They're not sure what's true. And there happen to be problems that cause serious erosions of your deals. Okay, you lose deals over these type of things. Because what happens is you get into a little bit of a gray area and it kind of, well, yeah, you probably get it through, and you get into a gray area and all of a sudden you develop problems. They are bonuses, overtime, how's overtime pay counted? How long does the primary wage earner have to be working before his income is counted? And how long does the secondary wage earner have to be working? How long does the secondary wage earner, part-time worker, have to be working? The first one is a bonus area. Now, when I narrowed it down to 4, and then I said, well, gee, I think I'll get smart. I'll call all the underwriters in question down at VA and FHA and get their answers and write them down. Ironically, they all started to come up with the same type of thing. We judge each case on its merits. It's the old CYA method, right? They're all covering themselves. Everyone, all of them almost used the same words. Well, yeah, well, we look at all aspects of the case and everything. However, once they had finished with that mumbo jumbo and they knew who I was and what I wanted for, they would start to come out and they would say things like, 2 years, by the way, if you can remember, it seems to have something fixed in their brains in underwriting. With bonuses, for example, okay? Let's take a look. With VA, you can't really see it on here, but on VA, what they're looking for, they prefer to see a past pattern of 2 years. They want to see tax return proof to substantiate this. They want to see a letter from the employer guaranteeing its continuation. Now I have to ask you folks, do you know how hard it is to get a letter of guaranteeing a future bonus? Now, they're not saying they won't give it to you. They're just saying, this is what we want. Once we don't have this, we're going to start to look at other aspects, such as the amount of down payment, okay, the amount of security on it, the amount of the savings. What kind of savings pattern does this person have? Now, I think you can see, remember our guy from Marriott, head chef from Marriott? I think you can see where this could be a potential problem. Look at this guy. Let's say he needed the $7,000 that he was going to get once a year to make a monthly payment, okay? Now, that to me is a legitimate underwriting question. If the guy needs it to make a monthly payment, he only is going to get paid on a yearly basis. You really can't approve somebody like that, can you? All right. But you have to recognize the problems and what they want here. They're not saying they won't. They're saying they're going to look at it. They're going to look at it pretty hard. FHA, same thing. 2 years, tax return proof. Remember, if they're not going to put it on their tax return, why should it be counted? That is the philosophy of underwriting. If a waiter makes 30 and he puts down 20 but says to you, but I really made 30 this year, you know, okay? No way, okay? No way. I can get a letter from my boss. No way. It ain't going to fly. All right. Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, basically the same thing. They're looking for 2 years. Now, the next one is overtime pay, okay? Once again, let's look what they're looking at. Same basic requirements as for bonus. They judge each case on its merits. Unbelievable how this term came up. Proof of continuation is very important. This means that statements from employers such as we think or there's a good possibility, they're not going to hold a lot of weight. You know, we think Jimmy Jones will be getting overtime. What does the think mean? Okay? How many people really want to commit themselves to and say, hey, we guarantee that Jimmy Jones is going to get overtime for the next 4 years? Okay? I had a case, I don't know if I got it, yeah, I had a case of a military guy who worked overtime at he was a sergeant, worked overtime at an officers club. You know what they wanted? They wanted a statement from his boss that he was going to have a guaranteed tour of duty of at least 4 years. Okay, which we happened to get one, I think, you know. I don't know how. But anyway, we got one. So the reason was he was using that income in qualifying. Okay? Now, with overtime pay, with VA and FHA, all of them, looking for the 2-year guideline. Once you break out of the pattern, they start to get very suspicious. Now, I'm telling you here, it's in your book, that bonus and overtime areas are very, very difficult areas to deal with. When you pick this up from qualifying up front, accurately and in depth, right? When you pick this up front, you know you may have a potential problem on your hand. You should talk to a lender, at least to get his opinion on it. All right. Now, how about the major candidate for a loan? How long does the major candidate for a loan have to be working? Well, it depends. Obviously, they're looking for, with everybody, they're looking for a 2-year pattern, a minimum. Okay? Once you start to break out of this, then they start looking around. How about purchaser's age? Let's say you have a guy that's in the Navy, he's a nuclear MOS specialist, young guy, gets out, he's only been working 2 months as a nuclear MOS specialist. Are they going to count his income? For sure they are. Because he had a specialty. He transferred, he's doing the same thing. If you had a guy that's a nuclear MOS specialist, okay, and then all of a sudden he gets out and he's a garage mechanic for 2 months, are they going to count that income? No way. In addition to that, quality of job. Commission jobs don't swing the same kind of way, do they? You're going to have to net out the income. All right? Now, especially short periods. Job switching. How about job switching? Today, a lot of people job switch. All right? They really do. It's much more prevalent than it was years ago, which was a serious faux pas, you know, if you left after, you know, less than 5 years or something. But you can job switch, but they like to see the changes within the same type of job category. They don't want to see a mechanic one day, a pilot the next day, a trash sweeper the next, all right? They like to see advancement within the same job category. A lot of this makes common sense, doesn't it? It's just that trying to get these guidelines, the 2-year, what's going to fit, hey, I got a guy, you know, in the real world, sometimes there's a lot of gray areas here. When you get into a gray area, talk to somebody. All right, and then the last one before we break is, how about that part-time person? All right, that part-time person, I must tell you, generally they're looking for the same thing. They're looking for a 2-year pattern, okay? Once you get out of this pattern, you're starting to run into a trouble. I have a little note down here that if you have somebody that's only been working 6 or 7 months, okay, forget it. Forget it. Don't try and put it into a gray area. Even if you get to someone with a year, okay, as a part-time employee, you can run into problems.
Well, if they got in where that comparison was just a couple of dollars off, would they then take a look at her additional income if it hadn't been figured?
Oh, for sure. If it had, oh, absolutely. In fact, I would have to say in that case, Ann, that if someone, let's say, was working 8 months, okay, that they would give them the person the loan on the basis of that. All right, especially if you had a nice letter. This is where you all and a good mortgage lender can help you out when you can run into a problem where you will say, hey, look, you know, would you ask your boss if he will give you a letter of recommendation? Believe me, underwriters only can underwrite on what they see. If they see somebody that's been working 9 months and they have just a glowing report from the head of a firm saying this person, you know, we think is going to be really something with our company as the years progress, underwriters will look at that. They really will. No doubt about it. Absolutely. Okay, any questions at all before we break? Any questions at all?
You just took my appetite when I look at what's coming up next.
Oh yes, oh yes. Thanks. If you turn to page 52.
Okay, wait a second. Now, why is there a 42 here and a 42 there?
Don't worry about that. It's not important now, is it?
Okay.
Because tomorrow when you get back in the real world, you're going to change those first pages anyway, so it conforms with your index, right?
Oh, all right.
Okay, now, if you look at page 52, there's 2 tests. Here is a test that you can take home and do yourselves, okay, to get more experience. The answers are in here. This will take you anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to do this one. If you turn to page 58, it's my famous Rhett Butler test with his 2 oldest sons, Gwaltney and Hormel. Anyway, this one is a much harder test, and this will take you anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 hours to do. Anyway, the answers are in there. You can pull it out, and then you know, you can do it and then compare the answers later on, so you can get some practical hands-on experience. I know you want to run home and do that, aren't you? All right. Now, let's turn to page 81, and we'll start one of my favorite subjects and yours. Oh, 81, yes. FHA 245. Da, 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 da. Okay. an outrageous program, outrageously complicated, etc., etc. However, there are a lot of deals around, okay? Maybe not when the points are 8 and 1, but when the points do drop down, and with builders who are willing to do it, there are a lot of deals around. Okay, excuse me. Now, with FHA, as you know, there are 5 plans, okay? Let's look at the plans. Now, this is the A program. We'll talk about the B program, the new program, later. There's 5 plans. The first one increases 2.5% for 5 years. The second one increases 5% a year for 5 years. The third one increases 7.5% for 5 years. And this is the one that we're going to put the primary emphasis on in our talks today. Plan 4 and 5 aren't worth the paper they're printed on. One goes up 2% for 10 years. Another one increases 3% for 10 years. Now, I must tell you, a lot of people have trouble with this, just like they have with regular FHA, working down payments and acquisition costs and everything. This program can be difficult to understand, but it'll be a lot easier if you understand one thing, only one sentence, and everything kind of follows from this. And that is, FHA is not a subsidized program. FHA is not giving a penny away. Then the next logical question is, well, wait a minute. I know from this program that the payments people make not only don't pay the principal, they don't even pay the interest. So what's happening here? What happens is, if your payment is $400 a month, but it should be $500, because the payment isn't not only paying the principal, but it's not paying the interest, the full interest, right? It's added back on and becomes principal, and it keeps getting added on, until a certain number of years, depending on the interest rate and depending on the plan, at a certain number of years, like a bell-shaped curve, it tilts back over again, and now when you make a payment, you start to pay off some of the principal too. But every plan is different. All right. Does everybody understand that? It's the philosophical. It'll answer when you have prospects that say, well, wait a minute, I shouldn't have to pay all that money at the end of the plan. Well, they owed it anyway. And once you understand that and you can translate it to your prospects, okay, you'll have no problems with this program. But it is a complicated program. Now, I want you to turn to the next page. It's page 82. And with these pages, it'll say 243. You should change that, obviously, it's 245. You should read the headings on these. Now, I teach methodology. Okay, I do not teach numbers because numbers change all the time in this business. But I teach method. And if you will learn the method, you can always plug in numbers and new numbers. If you look at the top of the page, it says methodology to determine P&I, MIP, that's your half point, isn't it, Grace?
Yes.
Okay, and down payment. So that's 3 things we're going to teach you to do here with all 5 plans. Everybody understand? Okay. The first thing, if you look at me, the first thing without looking at that, we go back to the old 203. What's the first question we had to ask ourselves when we were looking at an FHA deal?
Closing costs.
Is the seller paying any closing costs? Because then we had to work out acquisition costs, didn't we? One of the reasons I spent so much time on that aspect is it shows up here in the 245 program. We once again now have to, you can see in step 3, we have to deal and find acquisition costs. Does everybody understand how we did it? We looked up the allowable closing cost, then added it onto sales price to get acquisition costs. Mary, you with this one? Okay, all right. I can't tell by the way you look whether you follow or you got lost. Okay. All right. Once we have done that, then we can go right down to step 4. Step 4 says we are going to determine the maximum loan amount. It is necessary to do 2 calculations. It is necessary to do 2 calculations and then take the lower one. Now, the first step we have to do, once we have acquisition cost, okay, is work it out like a 203. Nothing could be simple. Does everybody understand how to work out the, 97%, then 95% of the remainder? What is the remainder, Grace? We take 25,000 from what?
From the acquisition.
From acquisition cost, okay? It's where a lot of people go wrong. All right. And then we're going to take the lower of them. Now, I want you to turn to page 98. Keep your hand on the old page, because we're going to flip right back to it. On page 98, you're going to see two tables. If you look at the top, Grace, would you read the top of that table, what it says?
The top of the table,
Yep.
GPM plans, is that what you mean?
Right, go ahead, read it.
Year one? plan?
No, it says factors, I'm just talking at the top.
Sorry. Oh, factors for computing monthly installment.
That's P&I. Okay, it doesn't say it, but that's what it means, P&I. Go ahead. I'll interrupt as we go
And
along.
highest outstanding balance factors.
That's the second thing it's going to tell us, the highest outstanding balance. Because remember, this loan is going to increase, isn't it, the principal amount? Okay? Go ahead.
For loans with 11.5%